right, here we go, everyone. Another awesome episode of the All Around Adventure podcast, and I am excited to be talking with Caitlin McCall, who is the founder of Eco-Conscious Diver. Caitlin, thanks so much for taking time for joining me today, and welcome to the All Around Adventure podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to getting you on this podcast, and I have to admit something to you. This is borderline selfish inviting you on because I'm a diver myself, but I've been a bit of a landlubber for the last few years. So I'm thinking this conversation might be just what I need to get myself back in the water again.
Definitely. Well, I think a lot of people this year are having that same feeling.
Right. Yes, absolutely. And we're certainly going to be diving into that quite a bit today. But I want to go back in time a little bit here and kind of start at the beginning, because every great story has a beginning. And so that's where I'd like to start with you as well. So take us back a little bit and just kind of tell us what actually inspired you to become a scuba diver in the first place.
So I actually got certified right when I was like 12, 13. My dad got me and my brother certified. We kind of live like right in the middle of the top of Texas, Amarillo, Texas. That's where we're from. Oh. And so he took us up to New Mexico and certified us in the Blue Hole, which is a really, really cold place. They had to put like hot water down our wetsuits for us to stay under just long enough to get certified. But he wanted us to all go diving on vacations together. So after that, in high school and stuff, we went to Honduras a lot and other places in the Caribbean and scuba dove as a family, which was pretty cool.
No, that does sound really cool. You really got an early start at that too. So,
yeah. But it's interesting. I didn't really dive kind of the whole time I was in college. So there was like a gap there where it was like, I dove like in high school and then as an adult, but so yeah.
Yeah. And where was this place in New Mexico? Because, I was kind of surprised that, you were saying that you were going to New Mexico of all places inland to get certified rather than on the coast somewhere.
Yeah, well, it's called the Blue Hole in New Mexico. It's like the only open water, considered open water place that's close to Amarillo. It's actually closer than like a coast, because Amarillo is literally like the middle of the United States.
Right. Yeah. So kind of just starting scuba diving that early, how did you kind of feel going in the water and being submerged like this? Because, I think for some people, it may be a little bit of an anxious thing to do because, well, let's face it, we can't breathe underwater, right? So, I mean, did you have any worries like that when you kind of started going at such a young age?
I was so young. I think when you're that young, you're like fearless. Sure, things just don't scare you like they do now. Like I look back on some of the things I did, like, even when we were diving in Honduras with sharks, and I'm like, I would be scared now doing the things I did in high school. But, I wasn't really scared, but I have to say, like, being an instructor, I've definitely seen people get nervous, like whenever they have to clear their mask for the first time, which means like filling it up with water and then clearing it out. Just in case you have to. And when the water hits people's faces, they get this moment, you can see it in their eyes. It's like, I'm drowning, because the water on your nose is what makes people think that. So.
Yeah. And I remember the first time when my instructor said, okay, time to rip your mask, just clean off. And I'm thinking, okay, this is a little bit weird. And I remember one of the things I had struggled with quite a bit was I kind of started getting headaches in the pool because, I started in the pool when I was learning. And I was telling my instructor about it. I'm like, I'm dizzy, man. I'm just really dizzy. And he says, you're holding your breath underwater, aren't you? And I'm like, yeah. Oh crap. Yeah, that's right. I am, because I just forgot that, okay, I have this apparatus where I can breathe now. Is that like maybe another thing you might have experienced with maybe some of your clients as you've been instructing?
Oh yeah, for sure. Because it's just like task loading, because you're doing all these new things, but you've also got to think about breathing. And with a regulator, you're asking it for the air. You're not just like normally breathing. Mm-hmm. So you have to. That's why the number one rule in scuba diving is like always keep breathing. because that's like one of the first things people forget, I guess, just because they're doing all these other things. Funny.
Right. All right. Well, kind of, I'm going to ask you to put on your instructor hat for a moment here, and it'll probably stay on for the duration of the conversation, just as well too. But I guess now, when it comes to actually becoming a scuba diver, how does actually someone go about doing that? Because there's different organizations out there. Each one has like different requirements, and they may be like renowned around the world, or they may be local. Where would someone like get started if they themselves wanted to become a diver?
So actually, something that's pretty cool, especially right now, if people can't get to the water, they can start their journey to become a scuba diver online. You can actually go to the PADI. I'm a PADI certified scuba instructor. So it's PADI.com website, and they have an online learning portion. So you can complete all of the book portion. And then once you're ready, or once you're, able to make it somewhere to go do the dive portion, then you can look for a shop in your area or wherever you're traveling, and then do the rest of the certification, which is the dives that you have to do. But yeah, you can get started on your journey from home, which is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially right now, if you have the means to actually at least get the momentum going, so to speak, even if you can't make it to the water right away, you kind of get like the background. Because like even when I went, and of course this was like years ago before everything that's been happening in 2020, I still was in like the classroom for like the first several meetings before I actually went into the water itself. And I will say though, and I don't know if this is something that you've also experienced with some of your students, if it's like they worry about a lot of, I guess I'll say, the math involved, because, there's a lot of like time underwater, and, times that you need to decompress and this and that. It's just, has that been a challenge to try to convey, I guess, the math / scientific side of diving to someone?
The funny thing is, this is actually the one thing I really, really remember about when I was little getting certified, is that I had trouble with that. And I had to go back through the test because I historically am not that good at math. And so he had to like reteach it to me, and I had to retake it. And so it is. But the funny thing now is that, back then we were learning on dive tables. And so for those listening that don't know about dive tables, it's, basically like how long you can stay down at what depth, for compression and decompression and stuff like that. And it's like a physical table, but now everyone's using dive computers. And so a lot of like the updated courses now say like this, or just consult your dive computer. Always trust your dive computer, and it always goes back to that, because I think it's like people do get so overwhelmed, and it's like now, I mean, I don't even have a dive table in my dive bag. It's like you just have a dive computer and that's it. So.
Gotcha. All right. Well, yeah, well, times I must have really been out of the water for a while though, because I was using dive tables. To the last time I was in the water was in Tenerife, Spain. This was about 3 years ago. So I'm thinking, man, did it really change over that fast? But I guess technology evolves so fast in this day and age. I guess it should be no surprise that it had evolved in the world of diving too.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I mean, scuba diving is only I want to say 50-ish years old.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a really new sport. So, I mean, it's still just evolving. I mean, they just came out with e-learning like within the last 5 years too, to be able to learn at home. So it's all like, it's a pretty new frontier, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, I want to ask you a little bit about what was it that drew you to the water, or even continues to draw to the water now, because, there's something about the water that just has a drawing effect to people. About 80% of the world's population lives with about like 100 miles from the coastline. And I don't know if I mentioned this to you when you and I were connecting, but I'm an archaeologist by day. And according to the archaeological record, boating technology dates back about 40,000 years. So for 40,000 years, people have been trying to find a way to get on the water. And even Alexander the Great was able to successfully submerge himself in a completely sealed container, kind of like the first submarine, basically. So we people have just been drawn to the water, ever since, the beginning. But what is it for you that continues to draw to the water even now, even though you've been to many places? What continues to draw you to the water?
I mean, everything you just said really hits home for me. And, even now, I know I mentioned I'm from Amarillo, but I live in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, which is an amazing place for the ocean and to see a coral reef. And I have to say, it's addictive. Before, when I lived in Texas, I had never been living near the ocean. And then I moved abroad to Australia and then to New Zealand. And I got back to Texas and I just thought, I've got to get back to the ocean. I missed it, and it's weird that it becomes a part of your life. I always say, like, I would get into the ocean for all sorts of different emotions. Like, you get in with your friends and you have these like epic moments in the ocean with your friends, or, maybe with your boyfriend or girlfriend, or, I even had a huge breakup happen in New Zealand. And I remember just getting in the ocean and I was crying and the waves just kind of came over me and it like healed me. It's just got this great healing power, and it makes you feel like your personal problems are so small compared to how ginormous this thing is that's on our planet,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And also, again, just kind of keeping my archaeology hat on a little bit here, is that the Pacific Ocean alone, according to surface area, is so vast that we could fit every single continent in there and still have room to spare. And when you look at it that way, gosh, that thing is huge. And just kind of going along with what you said, that it's just this powerful force of nature that, you can't just help but have respect for. It's just, it really is something else. All right. So you kind of cued us in on some of the places that you went to, around the world. You mentioned that you spent some time in Australia and New Zealand. So let's zoom in on there for a second. What were some of your kind of more like memorable dives and diving activities that you remember from that location?
So whenever I moved there, I moved to Sydney, and I actually got my dive master certification in Austin before I moved, because I was reading online that was like a good job to get. So that's actually how I became a professional scuba instructor. Never realized it was going to blow up like this. So I was in Sydney, and there was one, it was called the Leap. And it's actually interesting because my parents came to visit. And so we go diving, of course. And, I call the shop and they're like, oh yeah, it's just kind of a normal dive. And Australians are way more outdoorsy and athletic than us Americans.
So I've heard, yeah.
Like, they'll be like, oh, it's just like a short hike. And it's like, you're like dying, And so they're like, oh, it's real easy. So, I'm taking my parents and, then we're hiking up this giant mountain, and we're like trading off carrying my mom's tank because we're like hiking up this giant mountain. And then we like jump off this like 20-foot drop into the ocean. And then it's like a drift dive. And then you have to like hike up to get back to where the car park is. And you're just like, this is insane. And that's just kind of how everything in Australia is. Like, any adventure you're going to go on.
Right. Okay. So just so I understand this, you jumped off this 20-foot ledge and fully kitted up, tank on the back, everything.
Yeah. And straight into a drift dive.
Oh, wow.
It was like so aggressive.
Oh, okay. And if they say that that's just the easy dive, what does like the hard dive or the advanced dive look like for them? That's got to be something like...
I have no idea. And I mean, this dive instructor that was taking us was like ripped, because he's doing it like 3 times a week or whatever. So
wow.
It was crazy. But yeah. But then we also, during the time when they were there, we also went to the Great Barrier Reef, which I mean, of course, is like epic.
A must see if you're in Australia. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, just a must see in your lifetime for sure. Like, if you're a diver, even if you just want to snorkel, you have to see it, especially while it's still looking the way it is today. It's a marvel. I don't even know how else to put it.
Yeah, I would imagine it would just be one of those places that is hard to describe, and I'm sure, like, we've all seen photos of it, if wherever, but I'm pretty sure photographs or videos, even if we have like the most high def I say we're above 4K now. I'm not even sure what dimension we're on right now with video cameras, but I'm pretty sure it will never do the place justice than like seeing it for yourself. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's just insane. There was this moment when me and my dad were like kind of dancing around, and there was like this sea turtle in between us. And like, there's just like giant corals and anemones, with the clownfish, like you see in all the pictures. And, I think seeing that and then seeing what our coral reef in Florida looks like and how it's degrading so quickly is definitely probably one of the things that pushes me to marine conservation, just because it's a stark difference,
Right. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So what are some of your favorite diving activities? Because there's a lot of things that scuba divers can do in the water, but what are some of like your favorite activities that you like to partake in?
Yeah, and that's actually like the coolest thing about scuba diving is after you've been doing it a little while, you can kind of decide what you want to hone in on. For me, I really like underwater photography. And then I get home and I ID the organism, and then, I post about it, which I started doing, and tell other people about this stuff, which is really fun. But it's educational for me as well. And I'm also a certified scientific diver. So I've done a lot of volunteer work with the coral restoration nonprofit here in Florida, and then various other things, helping with like reef checks and stuff like that. So yeah, those are kind of my things.
What about, okay, so my personal favorite is shipwreck diving. Again, archaeologist.
Yeah. That's probably my third thing.
Okay. So if I may ask, just, to kind of pique my, again, archaeological curiosity here, what are some of your favorite shipwreck sites that you've dove throughout your time as a diver?
So, number one, I mean, the biggest shipwreck I've ever done was the Vandenberg off of Key West. It is huge. It's like the size of a football field or maybe 2 football fields.
Oh,
but
wow.
I probably logged like 200 dives on that thing while I lived there. And I just barely, I feel like I was still seeing new things every single dive. It's just huge. Yeah. And so that's really cool. And then probably another one that I really liked was the Rainbow Warrior wreck, which was in Paihia, New Zealand, because of the history of it. And I'm sure you can appreciate like the history of wrecks.
Oh yeah.
But it was actually like a warship. It was a French warship. And so they actually had a French dive master that was taking us. They were like, this is so ironic, that she's working here. But it was just covered in just beautiful. It looked like a bouquet of flowers, the whole thing.
Oh.
With just different anemones. It literally looked like just like one of those flower walls, and that.
So it just became like an artificial reef over time. It's been down there for so long.
Yeah. And it was just beautiful. I've never seen a wreck just so completely colorful, and it fit the name perfectly. So it's like the Rainbow Warrior,
Wait. So that was actually the original name of the ship. It wasn't like a designated name because of how colorful they found it as, or?
No, I think that was like the name of the warship.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
I know, right? Yeah, I could nerd out on shipwrecks all day. History is so cool.
Yeah. All right. Right on. So you told us a little bit about, you were in Australia and New Zealand doing some of these dives. And of course, in places like Florida, you mentioned Key West, and, you're based in Fort Lauderdale right now. But are there any other like good spots that you remember that you've had the chance to go out and travel to and get into dive in some of those locations?
I would definitely say Honduras is an amazing one. Roatan, Honduras. Any one of those resorts there. I went to Cocoa View, but there's also one called Anthony's Key. But literally, they just ring the bell like 3 times a day, and you can be like, okay, I'm going to go diving, or, I'm going to stick around the resort. But it's like all you can dive, all inclusive. And then you can also shore dive anytime you want. So if you and a bunch of people decide you want to go night diving or whatever, you can just do it anytime that you want. It's like amazing. But they just have a reef that's going like straight off of the shore. And then they did, shark diving. It's just incredible.
Oh, wow. That does sound really cool. And, I particularly enjoy night diving myself too, especially when you have your own light source and you see the colors just really come alive underwater. And I'm sure probably in some of the places where you have gone diving, they got to be like so colorful that it's got to be so amazing too.
Oh yeah, we actually did a UV light dive here in Fort Lauderdale the other day. Have you heard of those?
No,
it's called a fluoro dive, like fluorescent.
Okay.
But you shine the UV light over the corals and anemones, even like certain animals like fish will light up if they have like ultraviolet light in them, you know, for protection. Even octopus like light up. And so you're just like going along, like trying to find treasures, you know. It was so cool.
Well, actually, yeah, I think now that you mention it, I think I have seen photos of like of octopi that have, you know, glowed like that. I didn't realize that was causing it, the UV lights like that. So that's pretty neat.
Yeah, super cool. Yeah, there's so many things with diving you can get into. It's like endless.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So what I'm kind of curious to ask you about now is, you know, we've been talking about just how fun and fulfilling scuba diving is, but, you know, let's face it, it does have its risks, you know, potential dangers and hazards and stuff like that. So I'm kind of curious if you by chance maybe had any like, you know, misadventures, you know, albeit not catastrophic ones, but maybe like some close calls, maybe some sea creatures kind of got like a little bit uncomfortably close or anything like that come to mind?
Yeah. You know, you are breathing underwater. So, I mean, there's always inherent danger. But probably like the scariest thing that's ever happened is just a big bull shark coming by on one of my dives. And the dive master kind of was like, everybody stop. And we're all like, what's going on? And you see like this big shadowy thing coming by, you know, but it was like far enough away where you can't see it. But he was really freaked. And because bull sharks, I mean, it's for the name, it's like they're just aggressive. You know, they say they'll take a bite out of you just to see what you taste like. And I mean, I don't want to make people scared of sharks, but you have, you know, they're apex predators. So you have to respect them. So, anyway, we kind of waited, and then once it was clear that the shark was gone, he's like, everybody get up, you know, like get out of the water. So that was pretty scary. And then there was one time during my dive master certification that you have to do a complete equipment swap underwater and also be trading air at the same time. So like you're taking a breath and then you're taking the air away from yourself and giving it to the other person. So I had to do it with someone who was like, he was literally a football player at my college. Like he was a huge guy and I'm really petite. So I was trying to put on all his equipment and his fins and stuff. And I'm like floating to the surface and I just freaked out and did what you're not supposed to do and like bolted and was like, I'm about to drown. Freaked out. And this is something you have to do. So I had to redo the whole skill, you know, in order to get certified. And like, but I had to like come back a different day because I was so freaked out. I was like, need to leave. Like, can't.
Well, yeah. And that's a tricky part to do it that way too, because, you know, you got like all these hoses extending out of you. And then sometimes, you know, your BC gets tangled up or something like that, and you're trying to get your arms through, and then of course with this bigger guy that you had to work with, he probably had a heavier weight belt too that he had to put on.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, but you know, they do that not because that's going to happen probably in the wild, but just so that you can task load. You know, so that you can get used to like being stressed out underwater, because as a dive professional, you have to be able to like protect other people or, you know, help other people if they need help.
Sure. Yeah.
Kind of the purpose of it, but I was pretty freaked.
Yeah. And then just as you were describing the bull shark encounter that you had, and I remember seeing pictures of these sharks, they look pretty sinister. It's just, you look at these things and you're just like, yeah, I don't want to mess with that thing, you know, like not at all.
Yeah. And, you know, that's the thing. I mean, like I said, you know, I don't want people to be like afraid of sharks. The ocean is their home, but, you know, you just have to respect them. It's kind of like you wouldn't go up to a lion or a tiger and like put your hand in their mouth. You know, it's like, don't get around a shark like that. And, you know.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's just, you know, for all intents and purposes, you know, we're guests in the water. I mean, since, you know, we weren't given the natural ability to breathe underwater, you know, for all intents and purposes, we're not really supposed to be there, but we're going there anyway. So it's like, you know, if we're a guest in someone else's home, we follow their rules, right? It's pretty much the same thing, you know, if we're in the water. And, you know, I remember probably the scariest encounter that I had. Well, this wasn't actually when I was diving. I was just in the water in general. I was in Tel Aviv, Israel, just swimming at the beach. And there was this kind of like a rock outcropping, just like a little bit away from the beach. And so I'm down there swimming. I'm looking to see if any sunken treasure, like, and I say that figuratively speaking, I was more or less looking for people's trash to see if it maybe had like hit the rocks or something. And I'm swimming down in between a couple of rocks and I see just one lone fish. And typically when you come across the fish and it senses that you're getting close, it'll just, you know, swim and scurry away, right? This one, no joke, spun around and glared at me. And upon closer inspection, you know, I had my goggles on so I could see fairly clearly underwater. It was a stonefish. And I'm like, okay, this is your space. I'm just going to go I'm just going to swim that way. Yeah, your space. So, yeah. Because I swear he was like just saying like, come at me. Yeah, just come at me and see what happens. So,
and I mean, if you have an encounter with a stonefish, I mean, they have some of the strongest neurotoxin, you know, in the ocean. So you're going to the hospital for sure.
Yeah, and that's exactly what was going through my head once I kind of registered what kind of fish this was. And I'm like, okay, I don't want to go to the hospital. And I still had about like 4 or 5 days left in my Israeli vacation. And I kind of wanted to not spend that in the hospital. So I definitely gave this thing a wide berth. So, I mean, it's strange. Even though I, you know, clearly had the size advantage on him in the water, I basically got nothing on this guy whatsoever. So.
Yeah. And it's funny, like his little personality too. So many people think like fish don't have personalities, and they totally do. I mean, that's like one of my favorite things about fish. It's like all the little funny stuff that they do.
Yeah. So do you have a favorite sea creature? Is there any like particular creature in the vast oceans that, you know, cover our world that just, would you say is your favorite?
So I love pufferfish. And I'm in luck because there's so many here on the reef in Fort Lauderdale.
Oh, really?
So cute. Like they look like little cartoons and they're always smiling and they have these big eyes. And it's really hard to get a good photo of them too. So I'm like constantly like every dive, I feel like trying to like get a good photo of them and, you know.
Gotcha. All right. Very cool. All right. Not quite the answer I was expecting, but still very amazing. Nonetheless, though, I think, you know, a lot of times when people might pose this question to someone, you know, they think, okay, they're going to say dolphins or
turtle
sea turtles. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah. I think I still would have to give it to the sharks because, like you said, they're the apex predators, you know, in that environment. So, you know, they're just cool too. So
yeah, they're super cool. Unfortunately, I don't see that many sharks, and that's, you know, a bad sign for the reef. But I do see a lot of pufferfish, so that makes me happy.
Right. So like to see like more and more sharks, do you have to go out like a little bit further away from shore, or do they come pretty close? What's their like behavior like?
It depends. I mean, you know, they do come into shore for easy feeding. And in a pristine coral reef environment, you'd see more sharks than anything else because the ecosystem in marine environments is inverted. So it's like an inverted triangle. And so, yeah, all of the apex predators are on top. So if you go to like, you know, an uninhabited coral reef island place, then it would be all sharks. So it's actually a very bad sign that we don't see sharks a lot of places. But down in the Keys, I used to see a lot of sharks. So there's definitely more there. So I think the reefs are doing a little better down there than they are up here. But.
Right. Okay. Well, gotcha. Well, let's go ahead and kind of like unpack that a little bit and kind of get into our discussion about conservation. And when did actually you become more aware of conservation? Is this something that you kind of like always like been doing since you began diving, or do you kind of just pick it up later on down the line? Where does it kind of fall in the timeline of your diving journey?
Yeah, so not really. I'm from Texas, I would say Texas isn't known for being the most conservation minded. And that's definitely true. That's part of my motivation is I hope people from home see the stuff that I'm doing and maybe they think about it when they hadn't before. But really the first time I kind of got into it was when I moved down to Key West, Florida. And that was after Australia. When I got back to Texas, I was like, oh, I miss the ocean. And so I came up with that plan to go to Key West. And I was kind of around town and, everyone was talking about this program at the college there that's really hands-on. It's called Marine Environmental Technology Program. And basically you learn about the marine environment. And then in the afternoon, your lab is like out on the reef. It's like insane. It's so insanely cool. So anyway, I did that program and just completely fell in love with it. And I just felt this calling that I should too. I was like, I love this stuff. I love diving. Maybe this is, what I'm really meant to do. And I really haven't looked back since then. I completely fell in love with it. And I was like, you see the degradation of the Florida Reef as well. This isn't the most pristine environment. A lot because of what Florida isn't doing to keep the Florida Reef intact, which is pretty sad. But there's a lot of work to be done in this area. And so that has definitely kept me motivated in marine conservation. I could move somewhere that had a really, I don't know if there's pristine reefs anymore, but a more pristine reef, but there wouldn't be as much work to do. So it means more to be in this area,
Gotcha. Yeah. So as far as like the degradation of the reef is concerned, now you're going to have to forgive my ignorance because I'm pretty new to this myself. And another reason why I was looking forward to this conversation, but what exactly is causing like the reefs to degrade in the ways that they are now? Like what are some of the threats that is either, from human activity or maybe other factors in the environment? What's kind of leading to this?
So really, all of them can be traced back to human activity, but probably the top contenders are overfishing, definitely overfishing, pollution, which is obviously causing an increase in CO2 in the atmosphere, and global warming, climate change, that sort of stuff. We know that it's heating up the oceans at a rate that we've never seen before. And corals are, I like to call them kind of divas, because they have to have a very pristine environment. So it has to be, in the 70s, temperature wise Fahrenheit. It has to be a certain salinity. They have to be, close enough to the surface to where they're getting photosynthesis. There has to be, enough nutrients in the water. It really has to be perfect environment for them. And so all of this doesn't bode well for them at all.
So just one little change is just going to throw it off for them, basically.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, it's just insane how much they're fighting. They call it like a death by 1,000 cuts, basically, because it's like it's not just one thing. It's like all of these small cuts that are happening and it just can't withstand. Here in Florida, the most recent thing that's kind of put it over the edge is called stony coral tissue loss disease. And it's a disease that they trace back to the Miami harbor, which is, one of the most traffic heavy harbors in the whole United States.
Right.
And so this disease, they're not really sure how it started, but it traveled all the way down the Keys. And now it's hitting the Mesoamerican reef all the way in Mexico too, and taking out all those corals. And really what it does is it's a disease that makes all of the tissue come off the corals. And so they just die. Because there's no tissue.
That's got to be an awful sight to see, like just the coral reefs just peeling away effectively like that. And now is this disease, is it being carried by currents or is it like by ships moving or what?
Well, I think initially it was by the ships out of the harbor, but now it's being carried by the current. And you can see, if you look at a map of the currents in the Caribbean, how easily it could go from the Florida Reef to the Mesoamerican Reef. So the worry is that it's going to take out all the reefs in the Caribbean. Scientists are definitely trying to combat this. There's all sorts of organizations that are working on it. They're kind of like sawing portions of the coral to kind of stop the spread of the disease, which is interesting. And they've shown that that has worked, putting like epoxy, which is kind of like glue in between to stop it. And then, of course, you've got the University of Miami, which is basically saying this is going to take out the reef. So what they're doing is collecting all the different species of corals and safeguarding them at the University of Miami so that if and when it does kill all the reefs, we can outplant them back, which is pretty interesting. So there is stuff in place, but it's kind of grim when you think of it like that, you know?
Right. Well, yeah. And then especially like at the rate that you're describing too. And yeah, you know, I've become a little bit more aware of some organizations out there. You know, I've met someone from Fish and Wildlife in Florida. I'm actually based in Tallahassee. Again, I don't think I've mentioned that. So I'm in Florida as well. But yeah, she was telling me about, she was in the Jacksonville area, and she was interviewing anglers there who were fishing for, I think, red snapper. And then I think it's like they were only allotted like just one catch at a time. And so like they were interviewing them as like, how many did they release? Because obviously if they can only get one, they're going to try to get the biggest one. So I guess that was kind of like sort of their means to kind of preserve the red snapper population within that kind of fishery thing right there. So it's more and more popping up there too. But I mean, obviously there's a lot of things happening within the greater populace too. That's, you know, kind of negatively impacting some of their efforts. Right. So,
yeah, for sure. And I mean, you know, with the fishing thing, you know, I really encourage people. Of course, we've got a lot of tourists that are coming to Florida and they don't know about the ecosystem here. And so I really just encourage people that are coming to visit a new area, coastal area, like look up what is some sustainable seafood option for you to get at a restaurant. You know, ask them like, is this local? Is this imported? Is it, you know, is it sustainably caught? They'll know those questions at seafood restaurants, you know? And if you're going fishing, make sure that you know all of the laws and you're abiding by them, because exactly like that one you're just talking about, they're in place for a reason, you know, especially grouper season is a pretty hot topic here, because of course, the groupers that everyone tries to catch are the biggest ones, and they're the females because they change sexes. So they start as males when they're babies and turn into females.
Oh, wow.
They're hermaphroditic is what it's the technical term.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Yeah, a lot of fishes actually change sex, but the majority of the big fish are females. And so those are like the childbearing, you know, most eggs fish. English. And so those are the ones that are getting killed in all these tournaments and stuff. And so basically we're killing all, you know, off the groupers. So they always say, you know, don't be the person that orders the grouper sandwich, you know, because it's kind of like not good for the environment, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, okay. So, well, yeah. you know, I mean, and of course, with the efforts that we're trying to do here, it's just, unfortunately, it's certainly a problem that we can't fix overnight, right? Again, like our oceans are vast, and you know, it's just you know, volume alone, the oceans are just so massive, right? So, but you know, it's not quite so much something that we would want to try to tackle like in one big fell swoop. But you know, there's small incremental steps and changes that we can do consistently over time. So I guess if you know, if much of our audience is you know, kind of maybe just becoming aware of this at the you know, for the first time, and they want to kind of start taking actionable steps themselves, what would you recommend? Like, where can they kind of start? What can they start doing today that they can maybe do, you know, small changes over time to maybe help out?
Yeah. So, you know, obviously there's some things that you can do in your everyday life, which I'll go over. But one of the big things is, and I know that this is like, you know, a little bit into politics, but not really. So basically just get involved and know about what type of things people are trying to pass in your area, what type of bills and laws, because a lot of cities now are trying to get more sustainable laws in place, like banning plastic bags, banning straws, takeout containers, that sort of stuff. And they need people to lobby for that and tell the lawmakers that that's what we want. A really good organization that you can follow on Facebook in your area is Surfrider Foundation. Surfrider? Yeah, they have that in pretty much, you know, every city, even landlocked cities. And you can follow them, and they'll have calls to action on their Facebook page, which tell you like, we're coming up for a no straw law, come down to City Hall and, tell people that you don't want straws anymore, or sign this petition. And those petitions get given to the people that are putting these laws into place. So a lot of it's top down. So it is a government thing. You do have to vote and keep up with this stuff. In your everyday life, there's definitely a lot that you can do. I'd say the number one thing is, reduce your plastic intake. And once you get aware of this, it's insane. I mean, you look around and you're like, my whole house is plastic, everything
right.
I own is plastic. But I like to tell people to make like one swap per month if you're trying to switch to a sustainable lifestyle. So maybe it's this month you swap out your plastic razors for a safety razor. And, those are like 30 or 40 bucks, but they last, forever. All you have to do is buy the new blades, which are really inexpensive. So it's a little bit of cost up front to switch, but most of the sustainable options you can keep long term. So it's actually better on your wallet anyway. So, one per month kind of thing. Of course, cars are, a big thing. If you can ride with a friend somewhere, have them pick you up for happy hour instead of both driving there, that sort of stuff. Ride your bike, walk. It's better for you anyway.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And, in a lot of these things, you don't necessarily have to wait for them to become rule or law before you like doing them too. Like I don't use straws whenever I go eat out at a restaurant. Well, that's kind of been instilled for me over a long length of time. I was also in the Marine Corps, and when I was in boot camp, we had to drink like our water from like a cup at the chow hall. We had to hold it with both hands and drink it like that. So I just drink water like straight from the cup every single time, and I always like decline the straw whenever they offer me one. So there's that they could change, and I personally like to use stainless steel reusable water bottles all the time. So it's and for any gentlemen listening right now, switch to stainless steel and get rid of plastic right away, because plastic is bad for your testosterone levels. But that's a whole different side thing too. But yeah, just simple things like that aren't really hard. I think, this water bottle was like $14 or something like that. And it's, you just keep reusing it over and over again. So
yeah, and definitely something to touch on is just to have a look at, basically you're voting with your dollars, even if you're not like voting in a political campaign.
Right.
Every day with stuff that you buy. So, have a look at their website, see if they have sustainable practices, see where they're getting their packaging, see if it's natural. Some people are even putting on their website now about their pay for their employees. Are they treating their employees well? It's like, why wouldn't you want to support great businesses that are doing stuff like that? So that's important too. And of course, sustainable fashion is a whole, we could have a whole podcast just about that. But there's fast fashion is definitely not sustainable. And there's so much waste that goes into that.
Right. Yeah. I think I've heard some about that. I think I might've seen some people do like recycled like swimwear, like they make swimwear out of like recycled materials from the ocean. That's a thing, right? Or am I just like imagining that?
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of companies coming out with that. I've even heard of a company that's making the little beads that you need for 3D printing out of recycled ocean plastic. So now you can pretty much 3D print like everything out of ocean plastic, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I try to shop at thrift stores when I can. I love fashion, but I'll tell you what, if you go to a thrift store in a nice area, I guarantee you there's some people that are changing clothes every season, and you're going to find a brand new Lululemon jacket if you want one. And no one's going to know that it's used. Some of it still has the tags on it. That's the crazy part.
Right. Yeah. Actually, speaking of thrift stores, one of my favorite articles of clothing that I own, and I'm not sure why, it's just so simple, but it's just so reliable, is I just have just a regular gray hoodie that I just wear like regularly. I wear it when I like go run when it's cold out, like it is here in Mississippi right now. And it's, I don't know, but you're right though. It's just, you got like all those options where not only will you save a lot of money and it'll be lighter on your wallet, but it's more sustainable in the long run. I'm pretty sure maybe a lot of people didn't even think about it that way until you mentioned it.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't feel like I sacrifice fashion at all, you
Mm-hmm.
know? I mean, it's great. I found, and I get so excited about what I find too. You know, I'm one of those people, I'm like, I found this for $5. You know? I'm like that person, but it's like a game, you know, what can you find at the thrift store? So it makes it more interesting.
Yeah, right on. All right. So, but before we leave the subject, you know, we're kind of starting to sort of bump close to our time. Was there anything maybe I didn't ask that you think, you know, our listeners just really out of like, no, anything in particular in the realm of conservation that, you know, you just want to mention really quick that maybe I didn't, you know, bring up?
I don't think specifically. I would like to tell them a little about my online courses that I have if they're interested to learn more.
Sure, of course, by all means.
Okay. Cool. So if you guys at home want to learn more about marine conservation, I actually have a course that's specifically designed for beginners. It's called A Complete Introduction to Marine Conservation. And it takes you through everything: ecosystems, fish identification, what you can do in your everyday life. There's like a million steps on there that you can take. If you're a diver, there's even a dive survey that you can practice if you want to get into that sort of stuff. There's info on nonprofits. It's really is just a whole complete introduction to marine conservation, and it includes 2 PADI conservation specialties. So if you're interested in getting into that field, you can add them to your resume, or it's just a fun thing to do, and you don't have to be a diver to take it. You can be a teacher, you can be someone that's interested in marine biology, someone who wants to learn for fun, anyone.
Okay. And along with that, you also got the podcast too as an additional resource. So give us a synopsis on that too.
Yeah. So my podcast is called the Eco-Conscious Diver Show. And it's really, you know, basically just me bringing value to people that are interested in marine conservation. I just wrapped up the first season, and it was where I talked to a bunch of different people in the realm of marine conservation, basically any job you can think of, and what they're doing, all the different ways people are combating, you know, the crisis. And it's really interesting. Marine conservation needs people with all sorts of skill sets. You know, even if you're an accountant, I guarantee you there's a nonprofit that needs an accountant. So it's really interesting, you know, to talk to all those people. And then this season, I've kind of taken a different turn, and I've done, you know, some Q&A type stuff. And I'm bringing on some more guests as well. But yeah, so it's been fun.
All right, right on. And I'll get links to both of those in the show notes for this episode so the listeners can go and find them there. All right. Well, one thing I always like to ask my guests is like, you know, travel, adventure, you know, it's not only do we get a lot of amazing experiences, but a lot of personal growth can come from them too, because sometimes we face trials, tribulations, we learn a lot about ourselves. And so what I want to ask you is, what are some of like the biggest takeaways and the biggest life lessons that you've been kind of able to learn and implement into your own life from your adventures? And I know that's a little bit of a loaded question because there could be a lot of them, but what kind of comes to mind?
You know, I'd say probably the biggest turning point in my life was when I decided to move by myself to Australia. That was probably my biggest adventure I've been on yet. I went completely by myself. You know, all I had lined up was a week at a hostel in downtown Sydney and a one-way ticket. And I was like, okay, I'm going to find a job and find somewhere to live right when I get there. And, you know, I ended up doing backpacking there and stuff too. But I have to say, since doing that and proving to myself that I can take on big tasks and I can do things by myself, I feel like other big tasks they're not as hard now. It's like, oh, I did that. So, I mean, I can do anything, you know? So I just encourage people to challenge yourself, do things that are hard because it pays off, you know? Yeah.
And of course you moving out there solo, it's just suddenly you got to basically solve your own problems. And there's not a whole lot of, you don't have much of a network there at this time where you can reach out and get people for help. It's like, if you're facing a problem, all right, well, better buckle down and figure it out because, you know, you're on your own right now.
Yeah. And, you know, it was a really a testament to, you know, I don't know what I'm capable of. And so I'm definitely really proud of that. And I feel like I carry that with me, you know, in everything I do now, which is pretty cool. It helps my confidence a lot. So.
All right. Right on. All right. Well, getting to the wrap up here, one thing I also like to do with my guests is ask them to issue a challenge to our listeners. You know, we've got to hear some amazing stories from you. You know, we also got to get a lot of information from you today, both in the realms of just how to become a diver and also in the realms of conservation work. So I want to ask you, what challenge would you issue to our listeners today for them to go out there and start living a more adventurous, and I guess I'll even say sustainable life?
Oh, wow. That's a loaded question. You know, I'd say go out there and find something that you enjoy doing outside. And, you know, this year has been definitely a time that I feel like that's been important. There's nothing like the outdoors to just show you that your problems aren't as big as you think they are. You know, it's just life. But it also gives you an appreciation for our planet. You know, so whenever you spend time outdoors and you're able to appreciate the outdoors, then you're more likely to make changes in your everyday life that'll be better for our planet, I think. So, yeah, find an activity, you know, whether it's camping, fishing, whatever it is, you know.
Yeah, I can certainly agree with you there. You know, there's something healing about it, especially, I mean, you know, and again, I don't want to dive too deep down this rabbit hole, but obviously mental health has been something that many people have been struggling with this year. But just like, even as much as like just a short day hike out into some green space. I'm fortunate to have some pretty nice green space where I live. And so just going for like a little bit of hike, getting in the trails by myself and breathing in that fresh air, it works wonders. And, you know, you come out of there in a much better state than you were when you went in. I imagine that's what, you know, diving is and getting in the water is for you. You probably come out of the water feeling a lot better than when you went in, I'd imagine.
Oh yeah. I mean, I call diving my therapy. You know, if I go too long without diving, I start to get a little itchy, you know, I'm like, oh, I need to go diving.
All right. So what do you got coming up? I mean, we are, by the time this episode will be released, it'll be kind of like around mid to late January. So we'll be in 2021 when this goes live. So what do you got on the docket for this year?
Cool. So I've actually got a new online course coming out mid-January that's called Eco-Conscious Underwater Photography. Oh, wow. So if we've got existing divers listening, that is definitely a cool course. It's a complete introduction. And I've partnered with one of my friends, Scott, who was a photographer on the Great Barrier Reef for the course. So it's definitely special. I'm also planning on doing a little weekend in the Bahamas for shark conservation. That's one of my goals. And I'll do that a couple of times a year. But that's, if you're going to be in South Florida, definitely check back on the website, subscribe so that you know when that's coming up. And I'm always hosting an event called Marine Conservation and Coral Reefs every month here in Fort Lauderdale. So if you're interested in learning about marine conservation and you're a certified diver, then book a dive with me and come dive and learn about the coral reefs.
All right. Okay. Well, I'll be on the lookout for when your underwater photography course goes live, and I'll get that linked up as well, so listeners can find them in the show notes. So right on.
Awesome.
All right. So what I have for you next is my final three. These are three, I like to think that they're fun questions that may be subjective, but every single one of my guests gets asked these three questions at the end of the show. So you're going to get asked these as well. And the first of these three questions is, what is your favorite place that you've been to so far?
You know, this is funny because I didn't dive here. Byron Bay, Australia.
Okay.
It's like a little surf town.
Do you see yourself doubling back there to dive?
For sure. Yeah. And now I've seen like videos of people diving there and I'm like, why didn't I dive there? I just didn't. But it's just got a really good vibe. It was like a really chill kind of hippie, like beach town. And it was really relaxing there. It has like its own thing. If you've been to Byron Bay, you know.
Okay. Right on. And the next question, what is one thing on your bucket list that you have yet to do?
I There's a dive I really want to do in Iceland, and you have to be dry suit certified. So that's probably the first thing I'd have to do. But you can dive between two tectonic plates.
I think I've heard about this. Yeah.
Yeah. You can literally touch two tectonic plates at the same time while you're diving, which is so cool. I mean, it's like epic.
Yeah, just hopefully they don't move on you while you're down there or something outrageous like that. So, yeah, dry suit diving was an entirely different animal. I did it in Michigan, like that's where I'm from originally. So I was trained in the Great Lakes to be a diver there. So, but yeah, and of course the fresh water is so goddamn cold. So I wanted to get dry suit certified. But yeah, it's in terms of just buoyancy though, is an entirely different animal. Just how you got to shift yourself around because all the air is just in your dry suit, and I'm like, okay, this is interesting. But it's kind of cool though because it does exactly what it's supposed to do. You get out, you take that thing off, and you're completely dry, and it's pretty amazing. So
it is, yeah.
So I hope you get a chance to do that soon though. So all right, and the last question, and this is a two-parter. What is your favorite animal, and have you seen this animal in the wild? You might have already answered this.
Yeah, I said pufferfish. And I do see them all the time here in Fort Lauderdale, but I would really like to see a mola mola.
What is
Have you heard of those?
No. What
it's a type of fish. It's really fat. It's got kind of a long, kind of like disc shaped body, maybe like the size of a Frisbee but it's really fat. And they just swim like sideways. They're really interesting, but they have weird like patterns. So it's kind of difficult to see them. You have to go like certain times of year in certain places. So not very many people have seen them.
Gotcha. All right. I might have to take to Google once we're done here and look up some photos. That sounds pretty interesting.
Google mola mola.
Mola mola. All right. Okay. And I wonder how many of our listeners are going to be taking to Google right after this and looking up mola mola. So I might just leave a photograph in the show notes too. I mean, while we're at it, why not? So,
do it.
All right. Very, very good. All right. But before we close out here, let's just recap once again where our listeners can go to connect with you. Again, you got the podcast, you got the courses, you got your blog, you're out there in the social media space as well. So, fill us in on all the intel. Where can our listeners go and find you?
Yeah, so all of the information can be found at www.eco-consciousdiver.com. And my Instagram and Facebook is like SEA, Caitlin McCall. I'm sure he'll link that in the bottom. Oh, yeah. And then I also have the business at Eco Conscious Diver on Facebook and Instagram too. So.
Okay. Yep. And yes, I will get all those in the show notes as well. Nice and easy and convenient. It'll be in the regular show notes on whatever podcast platform, everyone has, or if they're watching, the video of our conversation on YouTube, they just got to scroll down a little bit and in the description, they'll find them there. So, okay. Awesome. Right on. All right. Well, Caitlin, I want to thank you very much for taking the time for joining me today. I know it's, tricky at times to make it on like these calls to get interviewed, but I appreciate you being here, sharing all this with myself and the listeners. And I'm just also must say, I just really appreciate how you're showing up in the world and, the efforts that you're doing. And, I know it's a lot of work and sometimes it's lots of bumps in the road, so to speak, even though you're underwater, there's no roads, but yeah, I appreciate the work that you're doing. So keep up the good work.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much for letting me come on and talk about it. It's been a blast.
All right. Right on.